The invitation came on embossed cream cardstock with gold lettering. You are cordially invited to a family dinner at the Ashford Estate to celebrate Harrison's retirement and discuss family matters. Formal attire requested. Saturday, 7 p.m. Family matters. That phrase should have warned me. I hadn't been to the Ashford Estate in 3 years. Not since my father's 80th birthday, when my brother Harrison had made it clear that my presence was tolerated but not welcomed. That was the night he'd introduced me to the guests as our half-sister Vera, the librarian, with just enough emphasis on half and librarian to make it sound like an insult. But this invitation was different. It was signed by Harrison, by his wife Patricia, and by my younger brother Jeffrey. All three of them, a united front requesting my presence. That alone made me suspicious. I am 53 years old. I have worked as a research librarian at the city's main library for 28 years. I live in a modest apartment with my cat, Fitzgerald. I drive a 12-year-old Honda. I have never married, never had children, and never asked my family for anything after my father's death 5 years ago. My mother was my father's second wife. He'd divorced his first wife, Harrison and Jeffrey's mother, when I was born. The divorce was ugly, expensive, and created a rift that never healed. Harrison was 15 when I was born. Jeffrey was 12. They blamed me for destroying their family, even though I was just a baby who'd had no say in any of it. My father, Edward Ashford, had been a real estate developer. He'd built the family fortune from nothing, creating one of the most successful property management companies in the state. When he died, he left everything in a trust managed by Harrison, who'd taken over the company years before. I received a small inheritance, $50,000, which I'd used to pay off my student loans and put a down payment on my apartment. Harrison and Jeffrey had received millions. The estate, the company, the investment portfolios, everything of real value. I'd made peace with that, or at least I'd told myself I had. Saturday evening, I put on the only formal dress I owned, a simple navy blue sheath I'd bought for a colleague's wedding, and drove to the Ashford Estate. The house sat on 15 acres outside the city, a sprawling colonial with white columns and manicured gardens. It had been in our family for 30 years, purchased with the profits from my father's first major development project. The driveway was full of expensive cars, Mercedes, BMW, a Porsche that must have been Jeffrey's. My Honda looked like a servant's vehicle parked among them. Patricia answered the door. She was wearing a cream silk dress that probably cost more than I made in a month, with diamonds at her throat and wrists. She looked me up and down with barely concealed disdain. "Vera, how nice of you to come. We were afraid you might not have anything appropriate to wear." "Hello, Patricia. Thank you for inviting me." She led me through the house, past rooms I remembered from childhood, now redecorated in Patricia's taste, all whites and grays and uncomfortable-looking furniture, to the formal dining room. The table was set for 8. Harrison sat at the head, where my father used to sit. Jeffrey was to his right with his wife, Amanda. Patricia took her place at Harrison's left. 3 other people I didn't recognize occupied the remaining seats. I was directed to the foot of the table, as far from Harrison as possible. "Everyone, this is Vera," Harrison announced as I sat down, "our father's daughter from his second marriage. Vera, these are our attorneys, Mr. Whitmore, Ms. Chen, and Mr. Baker. They're here to discuss some family business." 3 attorneys, for a retirement dinner. My instincts, already on alert, went into overdrive. Dinner was served by hired staff, probably people who worked for one of Harrison's properties. The food was expensive, salmon, roasted vegetables, some kind of fancy potato dish, but I could barely taste it. I was too focused on the undercurrent of tension in the room. The conversation was light at first. Harrison talked about his retirement plans, travel, more time with his grandchildren, maybe buying a boat. Jeffrey talked about expanding the company into commercial properties. Patricia discussed her charity work. Nobody asked me anything. Nobody acknowledged my presence except to occasionally glance in my direction with expressions ranging from pity to contempt. Then, after the main course was cleared and before dessert, Harrison cleared his throat. "Vera, we asked you here tonight because there's something we need to discuss. Something about Father's estate." I set down my water glass carefully. "I thought the estate was settled 5 years ago." "Legally, yes. But we've discovered some irregularities. Issues that need to be addressed. He nodded to Mr. Whitmore, who opened a leather portfolio and pulled out several documents. Miss Ashford, Whitmore began, it has come to our attention that at the time of your father's death, certain assets were not properly accounted for. Specifically, there was a property, a small commercial building downtown, that was placed in your name approximately 6 months before your father's death. I blinked. I don't own any commercial property. According to the deed records, you do. A 4-story building on Market Street. The paperwork shows it was transferred to you as a gift. I never received any gift like that. I would know if I owned a building. Harrison leaned forward, his expression carefully concerned. That's what we thought. We believe Father may have been suffering from early dementia when he made this transfer. He wasn't in his right mind. The gift was never valid. The pieces started clicking together. This wasn't a family dinner. This was an ambush. What exactly are you proposing? I asked. Keeping my voice steady, Ms. Chen spoke up. We're proposing that the property transfer be reversed, that the building be returned to the family estate where it rightfully belongs. In exchange, we're prepared to offer you a settlement of $100,000 for any inconvenience. $100,000 for a building I didn't even know I owned. How much is the building worth? I asked. Silence. How much is it worth? I repeated. Jeffrey shifted in his seat. The building itself is old, needs work, but the land it's on, the land is valuable. Maybe $2-3 million. $2 to $3 million. They wanted to give me $100,000 for something worth $3 million. And you're saying my father gave this to me 6 months before he died, when he was supposedly suffering from dementia. We believe so, Harrison said smoothly. He was making erratic decisions toward the end. You remember how he was? I did remember how he was. He'd been sharp as a tack until the day he died of a sudden heart attack. No dementia, no confusion, just a man who'd built an empire and knew exactly what he was doing with every asset he owned. I need to see the deed, I said. Whitmore slid a document across the table. I picked it up and read through it carefully. The property at 447 Market Street, transferred from Edward Ashford to Vera Ashford, dated 6 months before his death, notarized, legally filed, everything in order. I set the document down and looked at the 3 attorneys, then at Harrison, Jeffrey, Patricia, and Amanda, all of them watching me with varying degrees of expectation. No, I said simply. No? Harrison's carefully maintained expression cracked slightly. What do you mean, no? I mean, no. I'm not signing anything. I'm not accepting your settlement. If my father left me this property, then it's mine. Vera, be reasonable. Patricia's voice dripped with condescension. You're a librarian. What are you going to do with a commercial building? You don't know anything about property management or real estate. Then I'll learn. Jeffrey laughed. It was a sharp, ugly sound. This is ridiculous. You can't possibly think you can manage a property like that. You live in a tiny apartment. You drive a car that's older than some of my employees. You don't have the money to maintain it, let alone develop it. Maybe not, but it's mine. Harrison's face was turning red. You're being selfish and stupid. That property belongs to the family business. Father made a mistake giving it to you. He wasn't thinking clearly. Was he thinking clearly when he left you the estate? When he left you the company? When he gave you millions while I got 50,000? My voice was rising now. Years of swallowed insults finally finding their way out. Or was he only confused when he gave something to me? You're his bastard daughter from his second marriage, Patricia said, her voice cold. You've never been real family. You got more than you deserved. The word bastard hung in the air like a slap. I see. I stood up slowly, placing my napkin on the table. Thank you for clarifying where I stand. Sit down, Vera. Harrison's voice was commanding, the same tone he'd used when I was a child, and he'd wanted to remind me who was really in charge. We're not finished. Actually, we are. If you walk out of here without signing these documents, Mr. Whitmore said, we will pursue legal action. We'll prove your father was incompetent. We'll tie that property up in court for years. You'll spend everything you have on legal fees. I reached into my purse and pulled out a folded document. I'd brought it as insurance, not really believing I'd need it. But my father had taught me one thing. Always be prepared. Before you do that, I said, placing the document on the table, you might want to read this. Harrison picked it up, unfolded it, and his face went white. It was a letter, written by my father, dated 1 week before his death, addressed to me. Read it out loud, I said. Harrison's hands were shaking slightly as he read. My dearest Vera, if you are reading this letter, it means I am gone and your brothers have done exactly what I expected them to do. They have come after the Market Street property. I want you to know that giving you that building was not a mistake. It was not the action of a confused old man. It was a deliberate choice. He paused. I nodded for him to continue. Your brothers received the bulk of my estate because they chose to work in the family business. They earned it through their labor, even if they don't understand the difference between earning and inheriting. But you, my dear daughter, chose a different path. You chose a life of service, of education, of quiet dignity. You never asked me for anything. You never demanded your share. You never made your love conditional on money. Harrison's voice was barely a whisper now. The Market Street property is yours. I purchased it specifically for you, choosing something that would provide income and security without requiring you to abandon your principles. The building has 4 commercial tenants paying market rate rent. The income should be approximately $15,000 per month after expenses. It is managed by a property management company I have prearranged and paid for 3 years in advance. Jeffrey stood up abruptly. This doesn't prove anything. He could have written this while confused. Keep reading, I said. Harrison continued. I'm writing this letter in the presence of my doctor, Dr. Richard Morrison, and my personal attorney, James Caldwell, both of whom will attest to my complete mental competence. I am of sound mind and body. I know exactly what I'm doing. If my sons challenge this gift, they do so against my explicit wishes. Furthermore, they should know that I have left additional documentation with James Caldwell outlining other aspects of my estate that may surprise them. I suggest they proceed carefully. The room was silent except for the sound of Harrison's breathing. There's more, I said quietly. My father's attorney, the real one, James Caldwell, not these 3 you hired, has been holding additional documents for the past 5 years. He was instructed to give them to me only if you contested the Market Street property. Should I call him and ask what those documents contain? You're bluffing. But Jeffrey's voice was uncertain. Am I? My father knew both of you better than you think. He knew you'd see me as an easy target. He knew you'd try to take back anything he gave me. He prepared for it. I picked up my purse. Mr. Caldwell is waiting for my call. We can open those documents tonight if you'd like. Or you can accept that the Market Street property is mine as my father intended, and we can all go our separate ways. Ms. Chen leaned over and whispered something to Harrison. Mr. Whitmore and Mr. Baker were both looking at documents on their phones, presumably searching for any mention of James Caldwell or additional estate documents. Patricia's face had gone from smug to furious. You conniving little... Careful, I said softly. Whatever you say right now might be relevant in court if you choose to pursue this. Harrison stood up slowly. He looked older suddenly, defeated. Get out of my house. Gladly. I walked toward the door, then paused and turned back. One more thing. The letter mentioned that you don't understand the difference between earning and inheriting. I think he was right about that. You inherited everything and convinced yourselves you earned it. I inherited one building and will actually earn everything that comes from it. That's the difference. I left before anyone could respond. In my car, my hands were shaking so badly I had to sit for 5 minutes before I could drive. But underneath the adrenaline, underneath the anger and hurt, there was something else, pride. The next morning, I called James Caldwell. He was an elderly attorney, nearly 80, but still sharp. He'd been my father's friend for over 40 years. Vera, he said warmly, I was hoping I'd hear from you. Did they come after the Market Street property? Last night at dinner, with 3 attorneys. He chuckled. That sounds like Harrison, always going for maximum intimidation. Did you show them the letter? I did. What else did my father leave with you? Ah, well, that's interesting. He left a second will. I nearly dropped the phone. A second will? A codicil, technically. It was to be revealed only if your brothers contested your inheritance. Since they did, it's now active. What does it say? It says that if Harrison or Jeffrey attempt to take the Market Street property from you through legal means or coercion, They will both be removed as beneficiaries from a trust your father established, a trust worth approximately $8 million that was supposed to pay out to them over their lifetimes. $8 million. My father had left them a trap, and they'd walked right into it. What happens to that trust if they're removed? It goes to charity, specifically to the city library system where you work. Your father was quite specific about that. He said if his sons proved to be as greedy and cruel as he feared, he wanted his money to go somewhere that valued knowledge over wealth. I sat down heavily. My father had known. He'd known exactly what would happen, and he'd planned for every possibility. There's more, Caldwell continued. The property management company I mentioned in the letter, it's been running that building efficiently for 5 years. The tenants are all long-term, stable businesses. The income has been deposited into an account your father set up for you. The management company has been taking their fees, paying expenses, and saving the rest. How much is in the account? With 5 years of income and conservative investment, approximately $900,000. I couldn't speak. Nearly $1 million that I hadn't known existed. Your father wanted you to be secure, Caldwell said gently. He wanted you to never have to depend on your brothers or anyone else. He saw your strength, Vera. He saw how you'd built a life based on your own values, not his money, and he rewarded that. After I hung up, I sat in my apartment for a long time, looking at Fitzgerald sleeping peacefully on the couch. My modest apartment that I'd been proud to afford, my old Honda that got me where I needed to go, my quiet life that had always felt like enough. It was still enough, but now it was enough with options. The legal fallout took several months. Harrison and Jeffrey tried to argue they hadn't actually contested the inheritance, just questioned it. Caldwell presented the dinner invitation, the presence of 3 attorneys, and the settlement offer as evidence of attempted coercion. The judge agreed. The $8 million trust was dissolved and donated to the city library system. The donation funded a new wing dedicated to my father's memory. At the dedication ceremony, the library director gave a speech about Edward Ashford's unexpected but deeply appreciated generosity to education and public service. Harrison and Jeffrey didn't attend. I kept the Market Street building. With Caldwell's help, I learned about property management, about real estate markets, about how to be a landlord. The building continued to provide steady income. I used some of the accumulated money to make improvements, updating the electrical system, renovating the facade, improving accessibility. I also kept my job at the library. The head librarian position opened up a year later, and I was promoted. I still drive my Honda, though it's newer now. I still live in my apartment, though I bought the unit next door and combined them for more space. What changed wasn't my lifestyle. What changed was my freedom. I was no longer one emergency away from financial disaster. I was no longer dependent on anyone's goodwill or charity. I was secure in a way I'd never been before. 3 years after the dinner, I received a letter from Jeffrey. It was brief and stiff, but it was something. Vera, I've been thinking about that night, about things we said. I'm not asking for forgiveness, but I want you to know that I've realized Father was right about a lot of things. I hope you're well. I didn't respond. Some bridges, once burned, can't be rebuilt, but I kept the letter. It was an acknowledgement, at least. A recognition that maybe I'd never been the problem. Harrison never reached out. According to Caldwell, he'd taken early retirement after losing the trust. He and Patricia moved to Florida. I heard through mutual acquaintances that they're still bitter about being cheated out of their inheritance. They weren't cheated. They were tested, and they failed. I think about my father sometimes, about how he must have known his sons' true natures, how he must have struggled with the decision to trap them, but ultimately chose to protect me over protecting their feelings, how he saw me, really saw me, in a way his other children never did. The Market Street building is worth $6 million now. The neighborhood has gentrified, and I've received several offers to sell. I've turned them all down. It's not about the money anymore. It's about what it represents. It's about my father's faith in me. It's about proving that you don't have to be ruthless to succeed. It's about building something that lasts on a foundation of integrity instead of greed. I host a family dinner every year now, not at the Ashford estate, but at a restaurant I rent out for the evening. I invite the library staff, Caldwell and his wife, some neighbors, and the tenants from my building. We celebrate not wealth or status, but connection, kindness, and the things that actually matter. At last year's dinner, one of my newer librarians asked me about my family. "Do you have siblings?" she asked innocently. I thought about it for a moment before answering. "I have a family," I said finally. "They're right here."